Tonight is a good reminder of why I do what I do, why this channel exists. It's because of what I always say before the end of all of my videos, and that is Steph Curry is the GOAT. Do we have a lot to get to about what happened in tonight's game against the Spurs? Of course. So much happened. I don't know if I can cover it all, but we'll try to get through all the details, good and bad. But it's been mostly so bad, I want to go through some of the really good things that happened. And of course, we gotta talk about Steph Curry. He got out to an amazing start to the season against the Lakers, against the Nuggets. He was on fire. He looked unstoppable. He looked better than ever. And then he started to struggle some. Some people will attribute this to age. Some people will attribute it to the schedule. For me, a lot of it is because of the lineups that Steve Kerr puts him in and the style of play that's involved. The lack of involvement, the lack of touches, the need to prioritize every single player on the team and prioritizing Steph Curry the least, which is the silliest thing you could ever do if you have a player of Steph Curry's caliber. If you are a coach and you're trying to win games and you have a player like Steph Curry, your number one priority every single game should be to make sure that cheat code weapon is on point, in rhythm, feeling comfortable. Every single game, that is the priority because that is what puts the most fear, the fear of God, into the other team. And they don't feel so confident against you anymore because they're faced up against a God. But not if you're Steve Kerr. If you're Steve Kerr, it doesn't matter if you have Steph Curry on your team. And it's totally okay if Steph Curry gets 3 shots in a quarter, 4 shots in a quarter. He hardly has the ball in his hands. Essentially, you're doing the other team a favor. If it was literally any other coach than Steve Kerr, the whole world would recognize what I recognize about Steph Curry and the greatness that he possesses. The reason I call Steph Curry a cheat code is because he is the most unfair player I've ever seen, and he is the greatest point generator I have ever seen. A lot of people would probably question these things, but that's because they don't pay attention to what's going on and how Steph Curry has been used all these years. If Steph Curry had a coach like Mike D'Antoni, for example, he might have averaged 40 at some point. Anyway, we'll go over some really cool stats after tonight's game from Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler's performance, Moses Moody's performance, Will Richard in the starting lineup alongside Moody for a new iteration of the small ball lineup. Kuminga getting benched and subsequently not returning in the second half. We'll go through all these things, and if that sounds good to you, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and that like button so that this video gets out to all the Warriors fans out there. And if I look tired, bear with me. I've not been getting a whole lot of sleep. I've been making these videos along with some film breakdown. I posted another one today showing the big lineup of Quinton Post and Trayce Jackson-Davis against the Nuggets and what that looked like. And I'm not sure if all of you guys are seeing these videos when I post it because I posted earlier in the day, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, something like that. And as you all know, I usually post after the games, but it takes a lot longer to make those film breakdowns than making these videos. And the film breakdown really gets into the nitty-gritty of why I feel the way I do about all these players and why certain combinations may or may not work. So if that sounds interesting to you, be sure to go check out that film breakdown after this video. Okay, let's get straight to it. You know, a game like tonight, this is the reason I always tune in to every single Warriors game, and I have for roughly the last 15 years or so. And it's because Steph Curry is magic. You just can't miss it when you love the game of basketball and a GOAT is on the floor. You gotta go watch that. If prime Michael Jordan was playing in your time, you'd want to watch him as much as possible, wouldn't you? That's how I feel about Steph Curry. Obviously and unfortunately, there's not been a whole lot to enjoy over the years because of the losing nature. The greatness coincides with winning. And if you're not winning, then all the scoring and the magic is pointless. But when the team is built correctly around Steph Curry, and he has a lot of defenders around him, he has reliable defense so that he can carry the offense, and the correct lineups are being used, Steph Curry is the best player on the planet. I would take him over anybody else even right now. But of course, as you guys know, we just have not been seeing the correct combinations and the correct players to play next to him. And if the prerequisites are not there, it doesn't matter how great a player is, you're not gonna be winning games. Michael Jordan was no different. Before he got Scottie Pippen, he couldn't get past the first round in the playoffs. That is just a reality of the team concept of the game of basketball. And you know, he's been ill for a minute. He came back last night and he did not look so good after the game. I heard his voice and he still fully hadn't recovered. Fact of the matter is he was feeling so unwell. He wasn't traveling with the team. He was home and he was just lying in bed the whole time. That's how unwell he was. Despite that, and despite the fact that he's closer to 38 than 37, he still wanted to be out there last night in this big game against OKC. Obviously, it didn't turn out well, but I do think that it's sad that he just isn't appreciated nearly enough by a lot of people in this fan base. Steph Curry loves the game of basketball, and it takes a lot to get this guy to not play the game of basketball. And on the second night of a back-to-back, Curry put on a historic performance. Why is it a historic performance? Because 38-year-old point guards, soon to be 38-year-old point guards, don't score 44 points in a game. That just doesn't happen. Not unless you're Michael Jordan. And yeah, to me, it's MJ and Steph Curry at the top. There's a lot of stats that show the greatness of Steph Curry compared to Michael Jordan when it comes to certain statistical anomalies. For example, most 40-point games after turning the age of 30. Michael Jordan is number 1. Number 2 is Steph Curry. Look at this graph. Michael Jordan has 44 games where he scored 40 points or more after turning 30. Steph Curry, 43 tonight. And you better believe that he's gonna pass Michael Jordan when all's said and done. And I do question if this stat will ever get touched. This kind of longevity is not normal. You can see on this graph, Kobe Bryant is a distant 4th place on this list with 30 such games. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say Steph Curry had 44 points? He had 46 points. And check out this stat. Regardless of age, most 45-point games on 70% true shooting. Steph Curry is now up to 33. Michael Jordan, 29. Here's another cool age-related stat. Players with the most 35-point games after the age of 30. Michael Jordan, 93. Steph Curry, 91. You better believe that Steph Curry is going to pass Michael Jordan on this as well. In a season that has quickly turned tumultuous, we still have to keep our hopes alive. I keep my hope alive because of Steph Curry. Tonight was a good reminder that when you look for him regularly and when he has the ball enough and when you let him go and you have a bunch of tenacious group of players around him and those players are out there to support the things that he's doing, great things can happen for this team, and we got a glimpse of that tonight in the second half. Curry scored 22 points in that third quarter. You know, 20-point quarters for Steph Curry used to be pretty normal when he used to play full quarters. Unfortunately, Steve Kerr took that away from Steph years ago, limiting his greatness, taking his own best player out of rhythm. Even tonight, Steph Curry has 22. He is white hot. He is in ultra instinct mode. When your superstar has it going, you let him go. You don't bench him. But of course, that's what Steve Kerr ended up doing. Like the robot that he is, Steph Curry sat with 3 minutes left to go in that third quarter, robbing us of what would have probably been a 50-plus point game. But that's okay, because at the end of the day, the Warriors got the win. But yes, even though Steph Curry did hit some big threes in that second half, he actually didn't shoot very well from the three-point line. He shot 5 of 16 from the three-point line. That's 31%. And yet he shot 13 of 25 overall. And that's good for 52% from the field. See, that's the thing about Steph Curry is that people don't appreciate enough what he does inside the arc. Yeah, 46 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals. Steph Curry was unbelievable. Jimmy Butler was pretty awesome. 28 points, 5 of 7 from the three-point line. I honestly think Jimmy Butler should take a little more threes than he has been because he's shooting 39% this season. And after this game, he's going to be above 40%. I mean, he's camped at the three-point line an awful lot in this silly offense. He might as well launch a bit more and get more involved in that way. Because for me, I'm at a point where if Jimmy Butler is shooting a 3, I feel pretty good about it. And I guess I'll do it a little bit differently tonight. I'll just kind of go over the best performances of each player for tonight's game. Moses Moody entered the starting lineup. As you guys know, I have been wanting to see Moses Moody in that starting lineup because I think he's the most consistent wing defender on the team right now that is worthy of starting as a two-way guy. And like I said, this is a team game at the end of the day. Steph Curry alone is not good enough. He needs help from his teammates. And when you have a guy like Moses Moody, who's helping the team with 19 points and 5 of 10 shooting from the three-point line, I mean, that volume, that's like clay volume right there. That's efficient. And all those shots that he made, those are big time. I am really impressed with the increased efficiency of Moses Moody this season. And I don't know if you guys know this story, but apparently because he couldn't use his right hand to shoot, he was practicing with his left hand over the summer. And apparently through that, he accidentally realized that he can make a tweak on his actual shot with his right hand. So there's that aspect. And his release over the years has just gotten much quicker. You need a quick trigger if you're going to be a sharp shooter. And I would say roughly 2 years ago, his release was way too slow for my liking. And now in his 5th year, Moody is really putting it all together. He is a legitimate starting shooting guard slash small forward. Ideally, you want him as shooting guard who can provide for you. Very reliable 3 and D. And a quick shout out to Will Richard, who started in this game. I don't think that starting lineup is viable long term. I really don't think it makes any sense for the Warriors to be going to a small lineup to start. I just think it's senseless to put Draymond and Jimmy Butler out of position for longer than necessary. You want to try that small lineup, do it in that second quarter where you usually like to close with a small lineup. Try it then. Why are you starting with that lineup? Having said that, that is not a knock on Will Richard. He has some ups and downs in this game, and he didn't score much, but the one shot that he did make was in the 4th quarter when it really mattered. He had 3 points in this game. I really like the maturity and the calmness that he has about him, despite the fact that he's a rookie. I'll be interested in seeing how he evolves over time this season. I will also do a film breakdown on him at some point. I think he's a star in his role waiting to happen. Draymond Green, I feel like he has 4 to 5 annoying moments per game at this point. He does a lot of stuff that's a little annoying on the floor, and it can get a little frustrating, some of the antics. This was a difficult game for him. He ended up fouling out. He shot 1 of 10 from the field, and he was 0 for 7 from the 3-point line. But he did a really good job of containing Victor Wembenyama, all things considered. Wemby, at the end of the day, still shot 11 of 22 from the field. He had 31, 15, and 10, a triple-double. So I don't know if Draymond did that good of a job, but there were many relevant instances where Draymond was making a major impact on the defensive end guarding Victor Wembanyama. And that's what he's capable of, and that's why you deal with some of these annoying things that you have to deal with when it comes to Draymond, because you know his overall impact is usually worth it for this team. The more a player is able to give you defensive reliability, the more you can tolerate some of the things that he may not be so good at. And if you understand that mentality, then you will understand why I think the way I do about so many of Warriors players of present and past, and why I was accepting of some of these players despite some of the frustrating aspects about their games. You take Andrew Wiggins, for example. He can be a very frustrating second or third option when his offense is not there. His coordination is not the best. His passing is not the best. His feel around the basket is not always the best. Sometimes he'll just miss a layup point blank. And yet I could tolerate a lot of those things because I knew that he is going to limit the other team's best player and the perimeter as a POA on most nights. Yeah, so when you have somebody who is that effective defensively, you can't be nitpicking about everything about that player and then say, oh, that player did this and that, so I don't like him. No, it's first and foremost, how much defensive impact does that player have? That's why Quinton Post has gotten on my good side, because defensively he's become so much more reliable than what he was last season. I would argue that he is the most reliable center on this team right now, from a possession by possession perspective. That's why now I can deal with some of the imperfections that he has in other aspects of his game. Having said that, the Warriors are a winning team when Quinton Post is in the starting lineup, and especially if he's playing next to Draymond Green. Look at this stat right here. It was posted by a well-respected X's and O's guy, Joe Verre, and look at what happens to the Warriors when Quinton Post and Draymond Green are playing together. They thrive. I showed the stat yesterday, but the best 5-man unit for the Warriors right now statistically is Potts, Moody, Butler, Draymond, and Post. And that is why I said simply replace Potts with Steph Curry into that starting lineup and the Warriors are going to look like a brand new team. And they probably would not have gotten off to a 28-14 deficit in the first quarter of this game, and they probably would not have had to have erased a 16-point deficit, which they were able to do in that third quarter because Steph Curry got going. By the way, major shout out to GP2 who played 15 minutes in this game, and because the momentum was on the Warriors side with Steph Curry going off, Steve Kerr got away with a lot of nonsense tonight, a lot of insane lineups, 3-guard lineups, 4-guard lineups, a bunch of 4-guard lineups as a matter of fact, some that maybe made some sense given the circumstances, and some that just didn't make any sense. They started giving up easy offensive rebounds left and right, easy points in the paint. These are the things that give the other team momentum back that they should not have. And it does, of course, concern me that Steve Kerr was able to win doing these things, and these fool's gold things happen where he feels empowered to double down on really bad concepts. But either way, GP2 was huge in this game. He had 4 offensive rebounds in this game. The Warriors had 8 offensive rebounds as a team. GP2 had half of them, and a bunch of them came in the fourth quarter. And when he gets these offensive rebounds and Steph Curry has it going, well, let me show you this clip. This is the kind of thing that can happen where Steph Curry initially misses his first shot, but then GP2 is able to get to the loose ball, the offensive rebound, gets it right back to Steph Curry, who's relocating, and then all of a sudden, you have another 3 points on the board. GP2 ultimately has 6 rebounds in 15 minutes of play. 6 rebounds ties for the most rebounds on the team. But yeah, it's a really good thing that the Warriors were able to build a solid lead into that fourth quarter, because the Spurs were trying to make a comeback there, and it did look worrisome at various times. While the Warriors went the small route, the Spurs went an extra big route where they had, 7'5", 7'6" Wemby. I don't know how tall he is, but he's about that tall. And he was playing next to Luke Cornett, who is 7'1". A 7'6" guy and a 7'1" guy. That's dangerous when the Warriors are as small as they were. If Steph Curry didn't have it going, they would have been screwed. And the other factor about the Warriors going small a lot is that the Spurs are a little bit small too. They're basically starting like 3 point guards in that starting lineup. I mean, you can argue Vassell is more of a shooting guard, but these guys have good size on them. Stephon Castle is 6'6". Vassell is 6'5", and they have Harrison Barnes, who is 6'8", and a legitimate stretch 4. You know, I was watching Harrison Barnes in this game, and I can't help but feel like, man, if the Warriors were able to get a player like Harrison Barnes, who obviously used to be on the Warriors, if they can get a guy like that on the Warriors, he would instantly be their best small ball power forward. He'd be better than Jimmy Butler at it. He'd be better than Guy Santos, Kuminga, whatever guy you want to name. And given Steve Kerr's continued obsession with the small ball stuff, and inevitably the Warriors are going to have to trade before the deadline, maybe it's a guy like Harrison Barnes that the Warriors need to go and pick up, so that you can put Jimmy Butler at a more natural position at the small forward spot. Okay, I want to show you real quick some of the 4-guard lineups that Steve Kerr used, and I want to tell you which ones may be a little bit more acceptable than the other ones. And that's only within the context of the fact that it ended up working out in this game. Okay, so this one here, this one is really not acceptable. It's Steph Curry, Potts, Buddy Hield, and GP2. That is ridiculous. And by the way, when I show you guys these photos, I'm changing Steph Curry and GP2's height to 6'3". You guys know Steph Curry did an interview thing with LeBron James not long ago, right? In that conversation, Steph Curry mentioned his height and he called himself 6'3". I don't know why the league changed his height from 6'3" to 6'2" some years ago. They only did it to some players and not all players. Something about measuring players without their shoes. But Steph Curry is 6'3". I can tell the difference between 6'2" and 6'3". And when I stand next to him, he's 6'3". So you know what? Every inch matters in the NBA. And I don't care what he's labeled as. I'm not going to make him shorter than he is anymore. The guy is 6'3". I'm going to bring GP2 back to height as well. He is also 6'3". Having said that, Potts and Buddy Hield on the floor at the same time in a 4-guard lineup is not a viable defensive group. I don't care what it looked like in this game. That is not viable 90% of the time. Let's pray that Steve Kerr is not going to be on this energy for very long. And then there's this one where Will Richard is in the lineup over Buddy Hield. They are the same height, but I think Will Richard is just less goofier than Buddy Hield in general, more tenacious, more energy. So the combination of him and GP2 could potentially do some good things as 2 POAs on the floor at the same time. And again, obviously, they should not be doing this with any regularity. This is going to hurt the Warriors in the rebounding department, in the paint defense department. And then there's this one. This was probably the best iteration of it. You got Steph Curry, Buddy Hield, Will Richard, and Moses Moody. Obviously, in that scenario, Moses Moody is masquerading as a power forward. But let's call it what it is. There's not a single 6'6" guy here. It's a 4-guard lineup. But again, with Moses Moody's POA and Will Richard's POA, that has the potential to be very disruptive, especially if they're doing a bunch of zones like they did tonight. And there were a bunch of 3-guard lineups as well, but a 3-guard lineup like this one, for example, Potts, Will Richard, Moses Moody is closer to acceptable because again, the tenaciousness of the POA of Will Richard and Moses Moody. And because at the center spot, it's Al Horford and not Draymond, They have a little more size at the power forward and center spot with Butler and Horford. I'm also not understanding why Quinton Post was not in the game in the fourth quarter. He only played in the second quarter of this game, and he ended up being a +2 in the 5 minutes that he played. It's pretty sad when a guy like Quinton Post plays so well and his reward is a punishment, essentially. 5 minutes in this game. Quinton Post needs to be a starter for this team long term, get everybody in order into their natural positions, and that starting lineup with Moses Moody in there will look absolutely amazing. I don't know when, but eventually I feel like we will see that lineup. And when we see that lineup is when I think we'll see the best version of the Warriors. And now the big elephant in the room. Jonathan Kuminga was benched. There was talks from Jimmy Butler and Draymond about needing to play better defense, needing to do what we need to do, enough with the agendas and this kind of stuff. And Anthony Slater came out with an article talking about they were likely talking about the combination of Potts and Kuminga. Once upon a time, both of those guys were in the starting lineup. Now, they're both out of the starting lineup. So I don't think it's a coincidence that these changes have been made. And unfortunately for Kuminga, he was once again in this lineup where he was asked to play power forward. He can't do it properly. And this unit right here has persistently been a broken lineup. It has turned Steph Curry into a negative, which is unfathomable, but that's what happens. And as you can see in the stat sheet, that is why Al Horford is a -14 and Kuminga is a -10 and Buddy Hield is a -12. Well, he was a -12, but in the second half, he brought that down to a -3. Look, I've said this over and over and over again. I don't think that Jonathan Kuminga is a fit for this team. He did not play well coming off the bench. I don't think that he is a consistent enough player to have as a fixture part of the rotation and for the Warriors to be able to play consistently good basketball with him in the middle of a lot of those lineups. Some of that is Steve Kerr's fault. Some of that is the fact that Kuminga is simply an inconsistent player. And then it was reported at halftime that he had knee soreness and that he would not be coming back into this game. And honestly, for me, when I heard that news, I had this feeling that the Warriors were going to come away with a win in this game. Why? Because for the last 3 years, whenever Kuminga went missing, the Warriors played a better brand of basketball. I'm sorry, that just is what it is. And now that Kuminga is out of the starting lineup, they did not want to make this move because they wanted to keep his value high. But you can't compromise your season in the process of that, and that's kind of what was going on. And well, again, Kuminga is getting paid $23 million this season. You don't pay somebody $23 million to come off the bench and do what Kuminga is doing off the bench. So that doesn't work. So the Warriors need to move his contract by the time he's eligible for trade, which is January 15. And please move Buddy Hield as well and be done with this situation once and for all. Let Kuminga go to a better situation where he's not under a microscope and he can grow in his own timeline. The Warriors can do their thing in their own timeline, and the two parties can grow and thrive in their own environment. I'm sure there are some other things that happened that I missed out on, but this video has gone on long enough. At the end of the day, it was awesome watching Steph Curry work his magic, and more importantly, the Warriors come away with a victory to stop this bleeding on the road. 6 straight losses on the road. The Warriors have had enough. Steph Curry has had enough. And hopefully, this is the start of a very positive run for the remaining road games that are coming up. That's it for tonight, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Steph Curry is the GOAT.